Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. The multidimensional urge, a concept that I am proud to speak about, to be honest. I want to speak about the entropic state, the kind of entropic nature of the subjective realm. I want to speak about how, in the evolution of nature, the perception of a creature became multifaceted, multi leveled, multidimensional. The multidimensional urge is the moment when the creature began having more than one relationship with itself. I find the human mind oscillates between being the world in which the self is in and being the self that is in the world. It's as if the human mind is attempting to separate and rejoin every phenomena witnessed. What I'm trying to say is that the creature entertained a multidimensional relationship between the self and the other. Think of consciousness being a process starting from a value of zero. Then the number one appears. Then the number two appears. Then the number three appears. Now I want you to imagine a dimension of conception where it's unconscious. Literally, you can say it's the collective mind of nature before the mind of man. It's pretty much how everything, nature moved something. Something moved in accordance to something. From unconsciousness, from zero, the creature became aware of itself, of its body first. So I consider this the objective evolution. This awareness to the body wasn't, it was mindless, I consider. The mind is a very sophisticated thing that we call mind nowadays. But what it was at first, I find, was an effort of movement without direction. It was speed. It was unconscious speed. Then the conscious, from the birth of the subjective evolution, I call it when the subjective evolution occurs, then comes the first image of self. From the unconscious movement of nature, the creature became conscious it's a separate body, and I find there were millions of years of loops in evolution. Evolution is, we can never know. We can never know how long each phase of evolution was. Do you know, what if there was an evolutionary intention, but the process was in a hamster wheel for a while? That means it's like the creature just manifested to move. It's like a crystallization of nature's the laws of the universe moving on the surface of the earth. Now, as the creature becomes a moving phenomena, like when it becomes a creature, then it's like the intelligence arrives into a position where it's moving on the phenomena, then it becomes aware it is separate. So what that means is there's an unconscious singularity, then there was a unconscious multidimensionality, then there was a conscious singularity. Now it's moving towards a conscious multidimensionality, a conscious multidimensional existence. The multidimensional urge, I put the full title, but the multidimensional urge in nature. That was the mentality I had for the discussion. That it was a viewpoint where the creature became aware of itself as itself in a world. Then there came the evolution of the unknown. What that means is the subjective realm, the subjective evolution opened up a position of intelligence that was the space for the first time having a relationship with what's in it. So believe it or not, we feel space was here first, and then who put all the matter in here? We're seeking creation stories. But I find there was matter in which space arose from. It's another way of saying there was an objective evolutionary creature that, in some sense, attained the capacity to be conscious of the space it's in. So I say the edge of the objective evolution was the birth of the subjective evolution. The death of the objective evolution was the birth of the subjective evolution to a degree. It was a phase in existence where we reached the place to even be able to acknowledge a human being. If the person reacts to their environment, you call that being, if when a being reacts to their environment instantly, you can say that creature is an animal. But when a creature is in a natural space and it doesn't react, it observes, it looks, then does stuff, once the dams of ignorance break, clarity flows where it must, in some sense. I'm trying to say that this is what I don't see a lot of university professors speaking about, the multidimensional nature of the mind. We entertain so many stories. I consider this the movement from the objective evolution to the subjective evolution to be a sort of entropy. I consider it to be a system that once sees the opportunity, it fills up the space. It's a sort of expansion in accordance to fragments of manifest nature. Do you know, if you ask me right now how I see nature, I learned this from a tree. Trees have been divine metaphors for me. And I notice, yes, there's a multidimensionality that's visible, the branches of the tree, but then there's the roots of the tree that are in the soil, which can be visible if you dig deep, but at the same time, it's as if the resolve comes from the acknowledgement of what is there and its intensity, not per se always evidence based. It's as if sometimes when you wonder if somebody cares for you, somebody loves you, it's like in that moment, it's like, what evidence? What evidence can you go? Can you go break that person and shout, "Do you love me? Do you love me?" Like, no. It's a situation where life has a sort of performance. This is the thing. When you consider the natural universe as a performer and you watch it, something incredible happens to the intelligence of the being. The multidimensionality is no longer bound to a singular consequence. So that means the ego doesn't, and it's like the intelligence of the moment has found something more fascinating to play with rather than an egoic construct, a sort of mask of self through conception. The Sufi dervishes had a saying. They would say, to die before you die. And that meant that you had to have two births. How can you die before you die? That means you must have been born in another way. And so what they meant is that there's the birth of the objective positioning of the intelligence. From unconscious, directionless, moving atomic particles, there has come the sophistication of multidimensional, multi-paralleled senses of subjective self. I have found that that subjective realm is the second life. The child is like, once it moves around, after it's moved around, there comes, in some sense, the birth of the subject in the eyes of the creature. That birth into subjectivity is so subtle. It's as if waking up from a dream, but where you have woken up is the conditioning. It's like if a system can expand, it will expand. And it at some point became real for matter to be a thought to itself. That is where we are. That's where language is. Right now we are at the getting close to the edge of the subjective evolution. I mean, getting close, by that I mean like there needs to be a like thousands of years to continue. But I'm saying like there is the relationship man has with multidimensionality. There is a step beyond that. I say step because I don't know what other words to use, but there is something more than just seeing a multidimensional reality. It's like, so what? So what that there is heaven and hell? So what that there is the good and bad? So what that there is shadow and there's the light and there's the darkness? So what there is yin and yang? So what? And where that takes the person's mind is to, for the first time, wondering how the mind is set in the moment. And when you suddenly notice your mind has been set in a certain way for so many years, then comes the internal motivation that is required to change. There are some people in this world, even if you see them suffering, you cannot do anything. It's like you cannot ask someone to leave the swimming pool or leave a burning house if they don't see the flames. Only when they see the flames, the internal motivation arises. This is the whole issue. I thought, like, how ridiculous. There's this whole system of kind of the spiritual man walks in the forest taking every phenomena as a sign of the divine wills upon suddenly realizing, wait a minute, why do I need to be guided? And the notion of guidance is, believe it or not, only those who feel they are not at home with their intelligence, they will need something from the world. It's a very profound question. It's another way I say, I mean, these talks are not for the faint of heart. Because it has to do with the evolution of communication towards a sensitivity to what makes communication advance has nothing to do with the language. Language is a technology. We just use it. Right now, I am not these words. Even the images that are real behind my eyes, which I share as they arise in the moment, even these words cannot even be those images. There is a sort of strange separation. And the only thing you can do with that design of the world is to be like, okay, it's designed that way. What can I do? So once you have simple contentment, there will also come moments where you will be able to attain simple. It's as if the chaos is a teacher for the wise, and the order is a teacher for the wise. But for the unwise, chaos is bad, order is good. That's it. That's the most primitive. That's the caveman way we are living. We think what we like is good. And we think what we don't like is bad. And once we think what we don't like is bad, then we've given ourselves subjective permission to kind of throw words at any situation. I feel that modern psychologists do not acknowledge the depth and the intensity, the importance. Let me tell you, science has done one thing, which I appreciate, and at the same time, I am like, it has made the biggest blind spot for the secular society. The issue is that certain things are not in one dimension only present to be able to give you evidence of them in one dimension. So what that means is when we get this notion, there's the observable realm, there's the observable universe, and there's the unobservable, and we tend to ascribe imagination to the unobservable. That means it's like that which can be known, but at its core, it's like who knew where that thought came from. But what I mean there is that vision. Eyes are open in an unknown place. How much can you attach yourself to knowledge? How much can you attach yourself to the unknown? At some point, there comes this wind that hits the person. It's a moment. It's a moment in their life where they suddenly feel. It's for me. It was like that first moment where you're the front person in a roller coaster and the roller coaster is going down and you're on a roller coaster, an actual roller coaster for the first time. It's like that intensity, that adrenaline rush, because the uncommon reality has visited you. I can tell you that we human beings are limiting ourselves by thinking the word humanity means only one story. How dare we? How dare we enslave the narrative of civilization that must advance and update all the time to one story? How dare we? It's kind of like you can say a person who can get angry is a person who has not noticed their subjective self's limitations. You see, after some point, it's not good or bad. It's just how you wield the intelligence, how you use your attention to be something. And I am not a fan of like the kind of, I'll tell you, it's strange. I wasn't drawn to it. Maybe it's not for my voice to talk about like the law of attraction. But I don't, for me, there is no law of attraction in my universe. There is a mind, there's a vision. There's an attention that sees reality and realizes it can shape and paint any picture in the background. The person's mind can be goal oriented. You know, you can endlessly till the day you die say affirmations in the mirror. You can endlessly till the day you die do the same thing. But why should you? You see, it's the lack of trust. It's like, rather than, this is what I didn't like about this whole law of attraction thing. Rather than telling people, hey man, stop trying to escape what you have to confront and just continue through your life, rather than trying to find a shortcut to it. I am telling you, there's some things, there's no shortcut. It doesn't even make sense to find a shortcut, because it's like time is not a factor. The quality of the direct experience in the moment is the factor. When you actually start caring for your mind starts caring for you. Your intelligence opens up. You start realizing you're free from the words of mankind, yet you also live in them. We're not just living in objective structures, we're living in subjective structures. I call this the linguistic simulation, the language simulation. And once we move beyond the language threshold, which is a concept I created to suggest that once there are experiences that are literally you can't put words to, we haven't created words for. When there is a moment that the past can have no opinion about, the future has already moved the present's hand. That's where true art is born, out of a fearless freedom that was given to every moment of being. Do you know, this is probably like maybe too soon. I'm talking about this like in to an audience, uh, to the ears of the Homo sapien. But I'll tell you this: it's like thought allows you to place attention through any evoked subjective lens. Life can be made into a story, and it can also, you can step out of that story, you can dismantle that story, you can hold on to that story forever. But when you realize you're not a thought, there comes the roar of the value of the free experience. You return to a state. Let me tell you something hilarious that they didn't say in the Upanishads. Maybe somebody forgot, well, some scribe forgot to write it down, but it should be in the Upanishads, that the reason these ancient yogis, these incredibly enlightened people, some people said they were like children. And I was like, okay. And then I realized they're not like children. Their mind has returned to a state prior to the child learning language and self identification through subjectivity. They return to a pre thought state. And when they are in that state, it's the spontaneous of the will. So it's like suddenly, paradoxically, you enter heaven. This paradoxical state is literally realizing at first, like you can say, imagine like we are like a substance like water. We could be in a solid state, liquid state, gas state. Imagine the gas state to be enlightenment. Imagine the solid state, to imagine the solid state is matter. That means if we are some sort of substance oriented creature, we look at ourselves and in some sense see, okay, we're an objective being. So I am in no way saying you're not existing as a biological being. Any school of thought that ignores that has ignored nature. It's not, we're not trying to escape into paradise. Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference of the man who is patient because his eyes are running further than his legs? The objective realm is the solid state. The subjective realm is the liquid state. It's dynamic and movement oriented. It's a dimension of life where action activates the divine will. And then we say there's the gas state, and the gas state is a very strange state because there is something there, but you can't see it. That's the profound thing about it. There is something there, but it's not visible. It's like I can't see, like, so many people, you can even go to a scientist. The scientist doesn't see his brain. His eyes are from a first eyes like viewpoint. It's like first person viewpoint. So it's as if like the person can't see their brain, but it's there. Your heart is beating. So that knowing is also a suggestion that something is not visible, yet you hold it true. And so the value giver, that which holds the moment in a sort of light. What's funny is most people don't realize failure can never exist. And it can never even be publicized. It can never, nobody can see a person's true failure. Nature is designed in a way where you have access to your eyes. Our voices allow where our sight is dwelling behind our eyes to be evoked and come into, of course, the realm of communication. But there came an urge in the singular to be dualistic. There came an urge in the dualistic to, in some sense, move beyond, move towards infinity. That means, Mr. Within would say if there was an instruction booklet towards eternity, building eternity, if you wanted to build eternity, the four elements of the ancient traditions represent four states of mind. Ether, as the fifth element, represents the space, and it's an element because it holds all the elements together. That's why it's an element. Space is the bridge between various systems of dimensions of design. And multidimensionality is something, it's like one side of the bird's wing. One wing of the bird is multidimensionality. The other wing of the bird is the acknowledgement of the singularity. And so, as you require both to navigate, the mind requires chaos in order to exist. Did you not know? The ultimate question comes. I find this is the next Rubik's Cube of the future, the next mystical Rubik's Cube of the future generations. It's no longer is there God or is there not. The thinking has evolved to a point where we say, okay, if there is God, what is that consequence? And if there isn't God, what is that consequence? And how do both of these consequences relate to what is the best natural environment for the human being to thrive in? You see, the human being, there was a reason we stepped out of the forest, not to work as hard. But we didn't know that when we stopped working as hard as when we were in the jungles, as primitive societies, we came into a situation where we noticed that we are becoming minds, and the mind births through a story. That means the edifice, the sort of artificial. The issue with magic is that it's taking your attention to a shape, and only shapeless eyes can touch the eternal. So what I'm saying is these elements through ether become the presence of the intelligence of the being. That means whether you like it or not, your moment can be seen as your whole moment, you know? There is no one way to live because we don't have the same eyes. We're not clones. Following the same ideology, that's becoming a clone. Somebody following too much past the ideology. You see, it's like if I ask you why were words made? You can say the word is like a finger pointing to an image. So, for example, I remember when I truly started caring about the dictionary, I would open it and I would look at the various meanings that one word could have. I didn't realize the whole time every concept could be multidimensional. That's why we have puns. That's why we have certain words that can have meanings in various contexts. So what does that mean? That means a concept, this can be said to be a law of the subjective realm. A concept brings with itself the potential to have many contexts. So when the attention of the human being is on the idea of self, when you just care about yourself, let's say right now you fathom the most selfish version of you. Just fathom it. Just wonder about it for a second. The most selfish, savage, chaotic version of yourself. Just see that. Imagine. This is all in your imagination. Now, once you imagine that, what does that show you? That shows you if your intelligence, if your mind could project a chaotic version of self, why does it not have the freedom to project the ordered version of the self? And I realize it's about how seriously you take the wave of data that hits you throughout the day. I am telling you guys, the intensity of how we respond to phenomena will suggest the projection, how the light will reflect, the speed of the light hitting the mirror. It's like it's that point of subjective realization. Sometimes it's fascinating because I've discovered my attention to be non-local. This pretty much takes away objective fear. It doesn't mean it's wisdom. Wisdom never has to do with a set of laws. Wisdom has to do with just hearing the voice of what is alive. You know, this is why power in society was like a person, for example, reaching the top of a food chain. That was a power, and people acknowledge it. That's power. You won the game. You're on the top of the game. If this was a video game, you're the strongest character. Good job. Now, the next thing was, what is a power that is beyond supernatural? What is nature's ability? And we are that magical part of nature that is ridiculously more evolved than any other species around us. It's strange. It's kind of scary in some ways. It's like that's why we feel like aliens. This is why I remember in a science fiction novel, like I evoked this idea where the idea was that just like how it was this animal that suddenly had found a way to speak at the galactic sector of the UN. Oh man. Okay, so I'm writing this science fiction novel set in the year 5025. Somehow it's kind of, in order to be relatable, I've used certain typical structures we acknowledge in society. So the United Nations is still there, but it has a galactic sector. And now it's not only aliens giving speeches of freedom, but it's also animals with advanced AI, robotic technology who can now speak and be conscious. They also coming into the UN, and the whole government of this novel of mine has changed and become the enlightened society. It's like there is no longer a government; it's like another society that's governing the mass society. It's like it's like a better world inside governing a less better world. Strange. Both worlds have potential to change. Now, the enlightened society is such a conscious, I thought of opposite of the government that we're introduced to now. Politics should be a source of honor, not a source of trying to just have constantly buy pants with bigger pockets. It's like it's like you should realize politics is the honor of civilization. Politicians, for me, should be all honored as if they're the generals of humanity. dictating how, in some sense, certain structures that appear to people's minds. Do you see? There's two types of leaders in this world, guys. There's ones who care, that lead themselves only, and there are those who look at the world and they're like, holy shit, after 4 billion years of evolution, something is here, and we're daring playing corruption games with this? Power is no longer an individual value. That is the fool's errand. Run after it if you feel you can, you know, touch the bottom of the sea with one breath. A system that introduces rage means that there is some part of the system not being acknowledged properly. And what that is just the simple revelation that the political system is always evolving slower than its most updated citizen. It's like it's like there will always be a person in the community. And sometimes when I listen to some lectures, not lectures, what do you call it? Sometimes when I study politics, I find myself wondering what would be that enlightened society. And you know what I see? I see a government that gives as much as it can to the citizen because it has valued the mind of the citizen as the highest resource. The mind of the person there will be children born. Do you know how many like baby Einsteins are being born right now as I'm speaking? The governing power comes to the citizen and saying, I am you. And what that means is when one system in a multidimensional game starts giving freedom, it is so strange for other systems that they wonder through just the egoic doubt if there is something else. And that's when the mind is seen, just like you give a child a toy, it's like in heaven, it's happy, but suddenly take the toy away and it's like, oh my God, these tears are falling into hell. It's like, it's one of those things that no, it's as if you realize it's a game of attention. So manifestation has intensity. So it's like how intensely, how seriously you look at something dictates the value you attain. That means I always have this kind of mentality, and it's foolish because it's like some people say it's like, why are you wasting energy on this? But I'll say it's like I have this mentality. Like when I read history, my mind wonders how would I be a kind of character in that time in history. My mind, like that's how I remember certain historic events. I wonder if I was there, what would I be experiencing? And I noticed that back in the day, our ancestors were doing whatever they were doing, their normal life with their goals and dreams. Suddenly there was war. Their kingdoms were attacked. Villages were sieged. Like it was a chaotic situation. So what that meant is we actually come from a lineage of creatures that lived in more intense and complicated situations. We suddenly snapped out, went towards a sort of, all right, we build our own kingdom of comfort in nature, and then we choose what we do. But here's the thing. It's like the same psychology you find in this kind of university test that was done with lab rats, and they put this kind of like more stronger lab rat with a weaker lab rat in the same kind of thing. And these lab rats would fight, but it would be part of their playful wrestling games. And so what would happen is that the stronger rat won all the time until it realized if it won all the time, the smaller rat didn't want to play. Do you see? Do you see like how sophisticated the reception of minds becomes in a dynamic system? How complex laws become when motion arises. It's as if in one manner, yes, entertain a structure, a sort of story to your world so you can function throughout the day, but at the same time wonder where your eyes are, because that is a question I will wonder till my last breath. It's automatic. It's like, where else can manifest eyes go? Where else can sight go? It goes through the change of what it holds. That's where the multidimensional urge is born. That's when the mind can instantly, I call it, I remember in earlier talks, I called it was like there were these seers of thought, these pilots of consciousness that could land certain subjective designs into the linguistic simulation. They did certain contributions to the linguistic simulation that changed the overall structure. It was like the permission of ability. So I'll tell you this, imagine what's better than having one Einstein in the world is having 8 billion. And what that means is if the right thing is valued in the right light, there comes utility. So I thought in life, all right, certain things are useful, certain things are not useful. And suddenly I realized, no, everything is useful if you can see the utility. If you can look at an object and realize its significance is how your mind is being present right now. And it moves subjectively from systems. For me, an ego doesn't come alone. An ego brings a world with it. There's no just one ego hovering around, you know? There is no self standing alone. The self has to have a world to stand in. We're not astronauts when we try to remember who we were in the past. We're not just hovering in space. The self brings with it it's like they're codependent, two sides of the same coin. It's like the memory suddenly activates. And eventually your consciousness can become your free will's effort, the honest effort in abidance with how nature is, will allow you to, in some sense, observe certain uncommon micro movements in your own thinking. When you observe these micro movements, you suddenly realize, whoa, the mind has not been studied as far as it is behaving. It's behaving in ways our language is like, I don't know what to do about this. And anybody who's listening, feel free to comment or share counter views or whatever. Like, feel free to engage these ideas. These live streams happen once. There's a concept where it's a very unique concept. It's once the objective life is fulfilled, the duty of the objective life, when the duty and the tasks of the subjective realm are also fulfilled, then the person comes into what I consider the attention in the void. That attention in the void will remain as it is. It's as suddenly as if you're being still, and the cosmos is pouring your own clarity into you. Do you know? Nature, if honored, will become your ally. That's when karma cannot exist, because nature, the way the design of the universe is present in the moment, is in harmony with your how you are a personality. Language doesn't like you can when you realize you're not a thought. It's language can't hurt you. You become kind of like how Aristotle says it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. And any person who could not entertain an idea, and had to accept it, started war. It's like, whoa, this person looks at things different than me. Well, guess what? I want to keep looking at things the way I'm looking. Battle begins. Like, I think that's, of course, like a simplistic way I'm saying, but the value of our moments. I want to say a bit more about that kind of next mystical Rubik's Cube that I think is coming. It has to do with how the human being steps out of language, and then, based upon a pure, honest moment of observance, the intelligence recalibrates to what it wants. So, what that means is, imagine there's as a Jungian, Carl Jungian, like like imagine your name's Carl and you're Jungian, From that psychological approach, there's a conscious self, there's a subconscious self, and then there's the unconscious self. Now, in order for there to be a self, we say there's a mind. So imagine there's a conscious component to the mind, there's a subconscious component to the mind, and then there's the unconscious component to the mind. To truly confront the unconscious, you really can't do anything at that point, and the unknown moves knowledge. To truly perceive the conscious, in some sense, the known is moving the unknown. Therefore, free will can exist in a domain of its own control. That means our senses can rule our lives, or our attention can move beyond our senses. If experience is considered, you can't really say any moment of life is good or bad. It's just an experience of design, is it not? So the stories that we give it have to do with what momentum the sense of selfhood was thrown. Sometimes in life, you have no choice but to just keep going and see what happens. When you don't fear the void, patience can become a possibility. And once patience towards self, so many people are impatient with themselves, so that's why self depreciating thoughts arise. A kind of, you can say, even the concept of self loathing suggests this, that the person feels their worth is low because whatever worth they have, who would it be seen by, or what will it be seen by, and what's the point? And when you are directionless in nature, you just go based on the next data, that, like, literally the next information, the next world you get open to. So when you don't care, you kind of go with the flow like a dead fish. But at the same time, when you care, you can also go with the flow, but you're a live fish, you know? You're utilizing um, the balance between heaven and earth, or another way of saying the mind and the body, or the inner and outer realm. So once we realize the objective realm plus the subjective realm equals zero, then from zero there can come another one. It's strange. Life doesn't die. It's like made to be an endless effort. It's weird. Sometimes for me, it's like eternity could totally have nothing to do with image. That means the attributeless presence and the personality that is endlessly craving attributes. I find myself in a unique position. This concept of beyond the language, we are creatures of attributeless dynamism. It's another way of saying we think we are a creature on an earth, but we are actually a river that's moving the leaf. When that experience of the river moving the leaf arises, that's the sophistication of that kind of metaphor I said of the liquid state of the mind. The liquid state of the mind is dynamic, it's eternal, it's inspired eternally. You can say evolution has to do more with a field of intelligence than with everything arising from the particle in that field of intelligence. So the subjective realm, the ego is evolving, is it not? You see something better, you pick it up. Life has been a game of adjustment more than a game of desire or discipline. It is more about what you are seeing which causes you to respond to a certain reality. So, anyways, guys, the multidimensional urge is an evolutionary behavior that sprouted out of nowhere. The creature not only became aware that it was an objective being, it not only constituted itself as a subjective being, but now the objective being that is, in some sense, considering it's a subject, that subject is finding itself alone, like finding itself the present, the edge of the presence, you know? I still wonder about it if the edge of the conscious mind is the subconscious or the edge of the conscious mind is the unconscious. It's like as if there was never a subconscious. The unconscious was just alive in ways that we could not fathom, for example. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. I tend to, I find, speak as a painter. So, as every day happens once, make sure you're looking through the eyes of who you really are as a being. Then the multidimensional urge in nature would simply be an evolutionary momentum. It's like we begin harnessing the power of our subjective realms. That's when communication suddenly gets an inventive direction. It's like, what's the point of a lot of people talking about stuff? It's like it's a development into an externalization. Eventually, it happens to many thoughts. You can say when an inventor finishes inventing something, that moment where he does turns an invention on and sees that it works, it's a moment where what was in the subjective realm was brought more and more into the percentage of a manifest quality, and then eventually was duplicated and was made. It was replicated. So a thought became matter. And strangely, the material universe seems to inspire thought. That means, to be honest, it's very hard to imagine something that is not uh, existential, you know? And it's eventually comes down to honoring a sort of collective presence of who you are as a creature. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much